Hey everybody, this is Perch, and this continues in the trend of doing videos that I know appeal to a smaller segment, but hear me out. Okay, so even if you're not enjoying the absolutely epic comic One Piece, you should. And I want to explain a little bit about why this title, how this title has gotten as epic as it has, and where I think you can really kind of pinpoint the moment when this comic went from just a good, solid adventure type read to something that was truly one of the best books of all time. Now, One Piece has had over 1,000 copies, 1,000 chapters. Sorry, it's one of the most highly distributed, best-selling, graphic novels, manga, comics of all time, depending on how you want to classify that. And at its core, comes out of Japan, but it's extremely accessible for anyone in the world. Nothing in that comic is really overly culturally Japanese. It's fundamentally about a boy. The boy wants to seek fame and glory, and he's looking to become king of the pirates. And he assembles a crew, and he is sailing the world and finding adventures. And it's not, if that sounds kind of dull, you're like, I don't know, pirate story. I don't really want to have a lot of that kind of stuff. They spend very, very little time being quote unquote pirates. The amount of time it's spent on the ship is typically spent napping, I would say, or getting the ship to do things like flying into the sky and other kind of crazy stuff. The comic, I argue, and I've had fierce arguments about this with other people. One Piece, I would argue, is a superhero book, and that really irritates people for some reason. That makes people absolutely crazy to hear. But my argument is this: lots of people in the comic have powers. It is you eat this what they call, you eat the devil fruit, and the devil fruit gives you powers. So there's all different types of powers. No two powers are quite alike. You have everything from lightning powers to stretchy powers. I mean, the Miss Marvel character is Luffy in many ways. Our main character. You have all kinds of things from really good important powers to really stupid powers. You have a lot of dumb things. And part of where the book and where the comic really kind of excels is that you see that different powers, when applied in different ways, can be pretty significant. Something that seems kind of lame in one area, if you just kind of apply the power in a different direction, it becomes very, very useful and can change and break the world. So this comic typically deals in arcs, not unlike Western comics. You have, the West Blue arc, and then you have the slow assembly of the crew, and you then get into, once you they cross this thing called the Grand Line, and they start to get into Alabasta and these different areas where they have storylines, and typically a storyline, the formulaic way that it goes about is, the characters show up at some location. There's some bad things going on. Luffy gets sucked into helping whoever's there, and there's some kind of evil warlord, somebody who is using their powers to do something wrong, and they have to fight, and it looks bad for a while, and then Luffy and the team figures out a way to be successful and win. And that's every arc. That sounds pretty frustrating when you say it that way, but no, it's a very well done series because it manages with every arc to kind of build up the characters more and more. One character gets injured in one arc and they're still injured in the next arc, and the fact that they're injured indicates that it's going to cause a weak point, so the team has to adapt and change and morph and figure out ways to use their powers. Not everyone has powers. Some people, the ship's navigator Nami has the ability to kind of map and chart, although some have argued that at one point she gets the titty fruit. You'll understand if you see it. But at any rate, some characters are just very, very smart. Some characters have powers. Some characters are like master swordsmen, and they can summon kind of internal spirit to have them be more successful. But that's really, all things considered, it is a, by and large, by the numbers, and I mean this in a good way, book where there's a conflict, there's a hero, there's a villain, there's a fight, and it's resolved, and then they move on to the next adventure. But along the way, continually introduce more and more and more. So for me, the series, has had a lot of arcs, a lot of very enjoyable things. I liked the Alabasta arc. I thought that was quite good in what it did. I liked the Skypiea was okay. Thriller Bark, was all right. But where I think things really clicked and turned it from just an enjoyable, great comic into something relatively epic was when they had this kind of two arcs. They had this kind of break into a prison called Enies Lobby, and then that was immediately followed up with what was called the Marineford arc. And why these are so significant, I think, is a clear lesson for Western comics and for people putting out material. I mean, the biggest one is what I just talked about. They're in it for the long haul. You have a creator with a vision, and that creator is playing the long game. They're one of the greatest things I always tell people: if you're frustrated with Western comics, if you feel really irritated, find something like One Piece to get into, and great. You've taken care of a year of your life. That's you've got so much material that you won't mind the fact that you're getting less from other places, because there's 1,000 comics to catch up on, and that do build significantly on themselves to where it gets to be very, very significant. This Enies Lobby, the Marineford arc, is, I think, interesting for a couple reasons. It First off, by and large, it has different characters in it. You have Luffy, who's our captain, who's our kind of main character in the series. He's in it, and he's basically tasked to go try and save his brother, who's been arrested. His brother's been a supporting character in the series, and he's got to go try and save him from execution. He's been captured by the world government, by the Marines, and they're going to execute him, and he needs to go save them. But in the midst of all this, breaking into the prison, we've got 3 or 4 other kind of subplots. We've got a rival pirate who's trying to empower himself and gain more powers, and basically trick the government into giving him some leeway that he can seize more control. You've got the allies of his brother who also want to come into the picture and help. You've got a group that he meets while he's there. You've got a lot of different spinning plates here, and the fact that they leave several of the main characters in his crew that they've been building up for 400 chapters or so, they leave them behind. You would think, hey, this is Ryan Johnson subverting expectations town, but no, it actually allows them to focus on this story and bring in so many other faces that then get paid off in the next arc, where you've got even more people in the mix, and this cast keeps growing and growing and growing. And so they do this prison break-in at Enies Lobby, which is kind of fun. You see the different levels of prison. You get to do some wacky stuff, get introduced some new villains. You get introduced some complexity to these villains. The warden of this prison is not a bad guy at his heart. He thinks he's doing the job he needs to be doing, but he's which puts him at odds maybe with some other members of the corrupt world government. But he's still in the way, so it creates some interesting conflict. You get some real wonderful kind of friendship moments paid off. There's this Barclay character that was introduced like hundreds of episodes earlier, relatively quickly, who formed a friendship with Luffy, and then we didn't hear from him for forever. And then suddenly he comes back, and you have a powerful moment where he, more or less sacrifices himself in order for Luffy to continue to try and save his brother. And when then it leaves the prison, and it gets to this, what they call the Marineford arc, which is the invasion of the Marine headquarters, where the execution's about to take place. And all the rival armies, the other pirates show up, and you get this gigantic battle of everything all at once. And so you think about, kind of the excitement that people for the MCU had for, things like Endgame, and all these these storylines playing off. You think about that times 20. I mean, it's much longer, much more characters, more drama, more kind of significant things. Some really kind of powerful moments where you have this one character who basically dies in the end, and it's revealed that when he dies, he has not a single scar on his back and not a single injury because he was always so brave. He always faced forward. He never retreated. He never, he was never attacked on the back because he was always brave and stood up to what he was fighting for. There's a lot of just payoffs, and even bit characters, very supporting characters, are getting complete backstories and arcs in this thing. Why it strikes me, and so this moment, this Enies Lobby Marineford, is this kind of culmination of so many storylines. But even as they're going through it, they're still introducing new conflicts and new pieces and new problems. And it's like this stuff isn't going to get paid off until you get to like the Wano arc. Again, another 300-400 chapters later. It's just staggering how much is going into this. And the entire time I'm reading this stuff, or then later watching it, because I did it in that order: the read first, then watch. You hear in the back of your mind some of these complaints that you've heard from Western comics, like, oh, the Western audience, they can't pay attention. Like that kind of continuity. I see the shade that's thrown from a lot of more current comic creators in the West about how Chris Claremont's books were overly convoluted, too many moving parts, too much to keep track of. Nobody has the attention for that anymore. I've heard this from, we've seen statements from C.B. Cebulski, from others, talking about how the Western audience just, this isn't how people read comics anymore. Chris Claremont's style would never work today because, readers just cannot, it's so unfriendly that, who would go in and who would try and do all this stuff? Well, I think as we look at the 2020 sales numbers for graphic novels, and we see things like My Hero Academia and One Piece outselling like by a factor of 10 Western comics. And we look at My Hero Academia. I've been talking about One Piece, but My Hero Academia has a huge, dense mythology as well. Tons of characters, tons of supporting stuff, lots of complex plots, and yet somehow these things are selling quite well. And no, they're not just selling well in Japan. What we're seeing from these charts is that in the United States, the Western audiences, the stupid Americans that could not even begin to hope to understand Chris Claremont level of complexity and storytelling. You got to dumb it way down because there's just no way. There's no way anybody could figure this stuff out. What we see is that, no, actually, this Western audience is absolutely adopting this stuff. They're absolutely able to digest it. They're excited about it, so much so that they're willing to take a product that is largely reproduced in black and white on, little better than newsprint. And, so all the things we've been told, that you got to have expensive paper, you got to have, strong coloring, you got to have, very friendly, easy to engage, new reader friendly storylines. You can't have too much backstory. You can't have too much going on with characters. You got to have all the situations be completely relatable to, current slice of life type interactions. And yet, in the West, in America, things like the Marineford epic, things like what My Hero Academia does, it's kicking its ass. There's now, at this point, there's data, there's financial information, there's proof. Now, by the way, you may be listening to this saying, I don't like manga, and that's totally fine. Everybody likes different things. That's not the argument here. The argument is, can really complex storylines, can very dense character-driven stuff, can superhero books, has its time come? Every time I see one of these articles, like, is the time come that maybe people in America, maybe people in the West are just tired of superhero books? I don't know. Charts, the sales say no. The sales say people are not tired of it. That's what's selling the best. And so devoid of this content. So the fact that there's none of this being driven from the West, and people are having to turn to imported comics from Japan to get what they need, is It's just mind blowing. I'm sorry. Again, you may not like manga. Fine. But lots of people are buying this stuff. The sales numbers don't lie. I, the fact that My Hero Academia Volume 1, something that was produced years ago, is I think the number 2 graphic novel sold in 2020. Again, a story that has, and My Hero Academia, I would argue, is a little bit less Western friendly of a read as One Piece, in the sense that there is more Japanese cultural things that do come into play with My Hero Academia that do not exist in One Piece. Yet somehow, some way, readers are able to, figure it out, or their puny little Western brains are able to handle all of these dense storylines, all of these moving parts, all of this complexity. They're able to figure it out. But we can't do that for the Avengers. We can't do that for the Justice League. We can't do this here. What we need to do here is short, 5-issue, limited series. Keep it very simple, new reader friendly. Assume that every reader that comes to comics is, reading comics for the very first time. Oh, and by the way, we're going to need to make sure that the characters inside of the comics look like the reader. Because if we have a reader that can't see their, racial or gender identity in the comic, they won't buy it. They'll completely forget it. And yet, they are willing to buy a anime style, clearly Japanese kid and go all in on that. No problem. But this is why we got to retire. Got to retire Spider-Man. I mean, he's like, no non-white kid's going to pick up Spider-Man. Does this seem absurd to you? It is. So overall, like I said, I wandered off track a little bit, but One Piece, it's a good series. I recommend you pick it up. You really kind of start to understand how powerful this is as a story when you get to this Enies Lobby Marineford epic. A lot of great material long before you get there. But the fact that they can pull off these massive storylines, very complex, tons of characters, lots of heart, great emotion, drama, action, all of those pieces. This is really, when you talk about like the best storylines, the best things going in comics, this does get to be one of them. That little, if you've read it, you've had the great luck of reading those things. I'm sure you'll know what I'm talking about. Anyway, what do you think? Do you read this series? If you or not, if you don't read it, what works for you? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe. Follow me on social media. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for listening.